Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Omega Metroid podcast. My name is Andy Spiteri, joined as always by Dakota Lasky. Dak, have you been checking out the insane amount of tweets and threads and coverage that Nintendo has been giving Metroid on Twitter? You love to see it.
Yeah, I think they actually did another one today.
Yeah.
They seem to be doing it a lot. They're always reminding us, like they're talking about, just coinciding with the third Dread report. They're talking about, kind of the basics of Metroid. They just recently, today, talked about, the games leading up to Dread, and people are pointing out how only some of those games are available on the Switch, though Nintendo themselves also kind of pointed it out in the tweets. So, but yeah, I mean, the amount of, times Nintendo has talked about Metroid in the past 2 months is more than I think I've ever seen ever. So yeah,
ever.
It's awesome.
It's incredible. I love to see it. I just loved the old screenshots of the Super Metroid and then Metroid Fusion and all that good stuff. It just brought a smile to my face. I feel like this is what we've been talking about for the last year and a bit since we've been doing this podcast. It really feels like Nintendo was all in on Metroid Dread. So if this fails, we can't blame Nintendo. We can only blame ourselves. So,
well, I mean, if the game sucks, then I can definitely blame Nintendo. But it doesn't look like the game's going to. So, yeah.
Let's not even talk about that. That's definitely true, but I don't even want to consider that.
It is what it is. It very well. I am still someone who I gotta have it in my hands to really believe it. But from what I've seen, and from what I've seen from people actually playing the game, it looks like a lot of fun. It looks like it's right up my alley as a Metroid fan. So I'm not worried whatsoever.
Yeah, I'm not really either, actually, because I feel like 2D Metroid kind of reached a point, even forever ago, even with Super Metroid, it reached a point where the worst a 2D Metroid is going to be is still really fun. And the best it's going to be is some of the greatest games ever, at least to me. So I feel like no matter what, the worst that Dread is going to be is really fun, and that the best it's going to be this amazing bookmark, or the end of the book to this Metroid series and saga that we've been on for the last 35 years. So yeah, love to see it, love all the coverage. I literally just saw it on Twitter, and that's why it was in my brain as we started this show.
Yeah, it's awesome to see them talking about Metroid more than once. Or even mentioning it all. So, it's really awesome to see that they're actually, they're looking to really, bring in new people and keep them informed and tell them what's up about Metroid, which is really awesome to see. They're not just all right, here's the Metroid game, enjoy it, they're actually taking the time to really talk about what the game's about and sell people on the game, or just, remind people that it's coming, which is, really awesome to see. I pretty much retweet and it every time I see it. It's great to see Metroid Fusion getting mentioned. I really do think they are going to eventually put all of them on the Switch. It's just a matter of when, not if, I think. So, hopefully that's the case. But still great to see them talking about it on social media and really promoting not just Dread, but the series overall, which I think is also important too. Because we know there's more Metroid coming after Dread, not even in just Metroid Prime 4, but even more 2D Metroids too. So, right. Which is great.
Let's talk about something that you just mentioned, actually, and we're going to kind of bounce around a little bit this episode, but since we're just kind of free-flowing here, Doominal and I, and another user in our Discord, Fluffy Wolf, shout out to you, Fluffy, we were literally just talking about Nintendo Switch Online and Game Boy Advance games, and Fluffy Wolf was just man, I have this pipe dream that they're going to put Fusion and Zero Mission and all these other games on Nintendo Switch Online. I don't really feel like that's a pipe dream at all. I actually think that it's there's a very good chance of that happening. I think there's a very good chance of a September Nintendo Direct, because there usually is around that time, and I think it has to do with the ending of the financial year, but there usually is a Direct around that time. Also, if you remember, a couple of years ago when Nintendo Switch Online launched, it launched in September, so they've kind of been doing big events in September to convince people to resubscribe, everybody that subscribed for a year. So I could totally see Game Boy Advance games like Fusion, like Zero Mission, coming onto Nintendo Switch Online in September. I actually don't think that's impossible at all. I wouldn't say it's like a slam dunk, but I don't think it's like super far fetched. What say you?
At this point, I feel like I don't even want to bother speculating what Nintendo's going to do with like Switch Online because I have no idea. But that being said, we talked about this in the Discord chat as well with a couple other people. I think Focus Wombat was talking about it. How the older Metroid games, like the 2D ones, might come out after Dread, after people have played the new game, which kind of will bring people up to speed by in the prologue anyway. I think that's likely, and considering Dread drops in October after September, so I can see the Game Boy Advance games coming after Dread coming out. I do think that they want everyone playing Dread first and not spending money on older games, but spending money on the new game. And by making those other Metroid games, available, there might be series fatigue. People might not want to spend more money on an additional Metroid game, even if it is new. And I think they do really think that Dread, in and of itself, will be enough to get people caught up on what's happened in Metroid. And then if people want to go back, if they are more dedicated, they can when those other games come out after Dread. That theory, or like that kind of way of thinking, is kind of how I'm leaning. I think it's likely that the games come out after Dread. Maybe they get announced in September, like, hey, like after Dread they're coming out, but I don't even think that might happen. I do think that we'll probably wait until Dread comes out entirely before we hear about any other Metroid stuff at all, whether it's Metroid Prime 4, older Metroid games coming to Switch, whatever it is. I don't think we're going to get any other Metroid but Dread until Dread comes out.
Yeah, I see your point. I don't think that there would be series fatigue necessarily, and you wouldn't burn people out about buying the game since they're I don't want to say free because you have to buy a Nintendo Switch Online, but like if you already have that, then they're free. So I at the same time I could also see them saying like in September, like, hey, if you re-up your Nintendo Switch Online subscription for another year, in December you're gonna get all the Game Boy Advance games, and maybe that's just like the carrot enough to to drop in front of people's faces to get them to resubscribe. But yeah, I mean, either way, like I don't think that it's an impossibility. Like I feel like pretty confident that at some point we'll probably be playing those old games on our Nintendo Switch as part of Nintendo Switch Online at some point. I definitely feel better about that than I do about playing N64 games. I'll say that.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a matter of when, not if, in terms of those Game Boy Advance games coming to Switch. N64, I mean, I think I can see N64 games coming to the Switch. I don't know if they're going to do like an N64 mini, though I do think that's still like a possibility. I just don't think it's really a high one. But I don't know. I think the Game Boy Advance games are definitely more likely. I just think they're going to wait until we get the new Metroid games. I honestly think we might not even see the Game Boy Advance games come out until after Metroid Prime 4 comes out. But I could also see them coming out between Dread and Metroid Prime 4. At this point, it really is kind of just up in the air in terms of how they want to use those games marketing-wise. People have been talking about now, apparently, according to an insider, Metroid Prime Trilogy is actually ready, but they haven't dropped it because they're waiting for Metroid Prime 4 or whatever, which makes sense. So maybe they're kind of trying to use these older games as a means to promote the other games. So that could definitely line up with what you're saying. Maybe they do release those games in September, to try and put that as part of the marketing for Metroid Dread. I can definitely see that. I can also see them waiting until after Dread comes out so they can focus entirely on Dread itself and not any other game. I think both are likely. It just comes down to like what Nintendo's priorities are, and they're the only ones who really know that. I'm still thinking if I had to pick, though, they're going to come out after Dread, sometime before Metroid Prime 4, though.
Well, we will see. And I guess we really won't have to wait very long to see if the September Direct comes true or not. Like I said, I could see that happening. I could also see it not happening, of course, but like I wouldn't be flabbergasted if it did happen. I'll just say that. So, I mean, man, we're like 2 months away from that, so that's kind of exciting to think that we could potentially be 2 months away from the next Nintendo Direct. Although I pretty much don't think that we'll see any more Metroid Dread. At this point, I think that we pretty much have all that we need with all the Dread reports and whatnot. But that's okay, because that leaves room for us, Dak, to speculate about what potentially the role could be for some of the following creatures and characters in Metroid Dread. So we're going to go through a list here, and we're going to talk about how the following could be implemented in Metroid Dread, and just kind of theorize and speculate and maybe hypothesize a little bit. And I guess that we should start with the Metroids, because according to the latest Nintendo Dread report, Dread report number 3, Metroids are completely extinct at the beginning of Metroid Dread. So after Fusion, there are no more Metroids, and that seems kind of sad in a way. But then you realize, like, you know what? After Super Metroid, there were no more Metroids either, and they found a way to show up in Metroid Fusion. So I think it's definitely they're definitely going to show up in Metroid Dread somehow, and I feel like they are going to be connected to the Chozo, and that the Chozo, which is presumably the Dark Chozo as we've been talking about on the show, the one that we saw in the memories of Samus Returns, the one who was up to all that evil stuff. I think that this guy is going to be creating a new Metroid army. And remember, Dak, when we were doing a show with Rod way back when, we kind of talked about how maybe he could create like some kind of substance, not like a Phazon, but something that he could control the Metroids and make them like incredibly hostile with. I think that that's actually like, a somewhat feasible scenario to bring Metroids back. I could see that and make them like a really big threat again. So I think that they're going to show up, and I think that they're going to be at like the beck and call of this Dark Chozo. I don't see the Galactic Federation messing around with Metroids anymore, because you've done that once, you've done that twice. I don't think they're going to do it a third time. What say you?
All right, I'm gonna throw a curveball at you for this one. So
Right.
I agree that the Metroids are going to return, and I agree that the Chozo are going to be involved, but I don't think the Dark Chozo are going to be the ones involved in the Metroids. So here's what I'm thinking. So Samus is going. I think Samus is going to meet both like good, like okay. So let's say there's like two alignments for the Chozo, right? We obviously have the Dark Chozo, and then we have like the older good Chozo, the not Dark Chozo, right? Whatever. So let's say we call him good and dark, or good and bad, whatever. So I think Samus is going to be meeting both kinds of Chozo, and she's going to fight the Dark Chozo in some way or another. But she's also going to find out that the good Chozo are also trying to make Metroids again in order to fight the Dark Chozo, who are not trying to create Metroids because they know that Metroids are uncontrollable. Instead, they're making those big robots. They're making another Ridley robot or whatever because they know they can control those. They're not these crazy organic jellyfish that steal life or whatever. I think that like contrast, they're going to have a different way of creating, their army. And that's going to be a dichotomy between the two Chozo. And I also think Samus finding out that the good Chozo are creating the Metroids and not the Dark Chozo would be some kind of like twist element in the story. I'm throwing that big curveball in there. I think that's a possibility. I think that's where they're going to go with it. That they're going to kind of throw a little twist in there to us.
I could see that, because I mean, especially if the X are still around, because like that's kind of the whole premise of like why Samus is on ZDR, to investigate if the X parasites are still there. So I could see the Chozo recreate, the good Chozo, let's call them, recreating the Metroids, maybe with the best intentions in mind. But I don't know. I kind of like the idea that maybe these Dark Chozo kind of like stole, I guess, for lack of a better word, like the formula or the recipe, if you will, to creating Metroids, and like is now using them for like really bad stuff and whatever. I feel like that confrontation to me sounds a little bit more exciting, but it would kind of be nice to see Samus kind of at odds with the Chozo, maybe question them a little bit, because I think that I think we're finally going to learn a lot more about the Chozo, why they vanished, which, by the way, this Dread report also, we've always been led to believe that the Chozo are extinct. But this Dread report says something along the lines of like, they're not extinct, there's just not very many of them left anymore. So I thought that was a really interesting line. So I think that we're really going to learn about the Chozo in this game. I wouldn't be disappointed if we didn't, because I do kind of like that mystery. But it seems like, even looking at the trailers, we're seeing a Chozo in the trailer for the first time in the flesh. It just makes sense that we're going to learn a lot about the civilization and maybe where it went wrong, and why they disappeared, or their numbers are so few now. So I think obviously the conflict is there between the Dark Chozo and the good Chozo, but maybe it's also because they make Metroids and they have good intentions, but they just didn't learn their lessons. So I think that that would be a pretty cool road to take.
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely learning more about the Chozo. That's like confirmed. I mean, there's so much of the cutscenes and what we see in the reports involves them, and we've literally seen one. But yeah, I definitely think that we're gonna learn a lot about like what caused like the rift between these two, alignments of Chozo, right? We're gonna learn that history, and honestly, that's probably gonna be involved in and like related to why the Chozo like essentially all but disappeared from everywhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's definitely going to be like the source of that. And that's why I'm thinking that the two are kind of looking at things differently and not seeing eye to eye in one way. And the Metroids, that's what I'm thinking, is one of those things they might not see eye to eye on. Like the original Chozo or whatever, might have created them with good intentions, but are like unwilling to see like the destruction they can cause, or they see it, but they're unwilling to change and do something differently. Whereas the Dark Chozo are kind of like right in that they should be creating Metroids, but they're still bad guys and are, doing bad stuff in another way, just not with Metroids. Because I'm
Mm-hmm.
thinking another thing that makes me think that is that obviously somebody is building Chozo looking robots or mech suits that are large in size, right? And someone's building some kind of huge mech. And I'm thinking, who is more likely to do that? The Dark Chozo, right? So I don't know if
Of
they're.
course.
So I don't think they're making both those robots and Metroids. I think like it's probably one or the other. And so if anyone's making the Metroids, it's probably like the original like good Chozo that like came up with it, But I don't know. Maybe I'm kind of
I
looking
can
at it
see that
differently.
actually.
But I'm also trying to like throw a little bit of it. Like, I mean, that would be I think that'd be a really cool twist, because I'm assuming when Samus gets to this planet, she's gonna meet Chozo that she thinks she can ally with, right? And obviously there would be a Chozo that she wouldn't ally with. But if she learns this kind of ulterior stuff about what she thinks her allies are, or she thinks who her allies are, what they're doing, she's like, oh wow, like actually I got to worry about these guys too. Potentially they're making more Metroids. That's
Mm-hmm.
not good, So she has kind of two things to deal with. So I don't know. I think that might make for a more interesting story or an interesting overall. But obviously it could not go that way. But I think that'd be cool.
Yeah, you know what? I can see that actually. Now that you kind of laid that out a little bit more, like the Dark Chozo are building, their army of power suits,
Mm-hmm.
and what we'll get to in a little bit here. But maybe maybe the good Chozo, if you will, are maybe they don't have the recipe to create Metroids, and then instead they've kind of had a hand in the all of the E.M.M.Is going rogue, because the E.M.M.Is, of course, snap DNA. So who's to say that maybe they don't have some Metroid DNA on hand? So maybe they're kind of trying to get some of that DNA from the E.M.M.Is. That could be a potential reason why the E.M.M.Is have went bad and turned against Samus and the rest of the Galactic Federation too. So yeah, I think that that could be interesting. I think that it's probably more likely that the Dark Chozo have a
Yeah.
hand in Metroids. Maybe they'll pull like a huge surprise and like not really have Metroids at all in the game. I don't know.
Yeah. Maybe they're telling the truth, and there really are no Metroids. So that could definitely be the
I
case.
think that Metroids will definitely show up one way or another. Maybe what we could see is like a game without Metroids, and like kind of at the end of the game as like a cliffhanger or something, or maybe even like an after credit. It's like a new Metroid is created or discovered, or I don't know, something,
It's
so that pushes the series forward. I don't know.
it's gonna be them saying, Samus, you're the Metroid now. It's gonna be like the end of the last Star Wars movie, and someone's like, "What's your name?" And she goes, "Samus Metroid." Like she's like the Metroid character. Like that's what it's gonna be. I think like there aren't gonna be any Metroids, but then one of the Chozo's gonna be like, "You are the Metroid. You're the ultimate warrior." And then cut the title Metroid Dread. But I don't know. That's what it's gonna end probably. I think if Metroids don't literally show up, I think that's what they're gonna do. They're gonna go with well, Samus is a Metroid technically, so Metroids are in the game. That's what it is, and they're like emphasize that.
I'm gonna be honest. Actually, I wouldn't even hate that. Like as lame as that kind
No,
of sounds, like
I can see them
I
totally
wouldn't
doing
hate that.
that. I feel like that's totally likely. I feel like that's what's gonna happen. If I were to put money on all the options that we've just discussed, that's the one I would bet on.
Can you imagine like Samus gets a new ability to like suck out people's life forces?
I
That'd be
could
kind of
totally
cool.
see that. I mean, I could definitely see like her like being able to drain resources from enemies, or maybe like I don't know, like Kirby style, like take attacks or something like that. Um, Or maybe she's able to absorb the E.M.M.I technology and is able to use like the E.M.M.I like stinger or like like whatever the drill, and use that to drain resources and take stuff from stuff. Because her suit does kind of look like the E.M.M.I's, like the white part like reminds me of the E.M.M.I's. So it looks like a mixture of like Samus like merging with an E.M.M.I and her old suit to me. So like I could definitely see her somehow adopting or absorbing E.M.M.I technology in some way, whether it's like the scan feature or the insta kill or using that thing to drain resources or whatever or something like that. I could definitely see that happening.
Well, let's shift gears and talk about what we think, or I guess I should say, if we think our
No,
man
not if.
Ridley.
Not if. It's happening.
You're going. You're
It's
going
happening.
for sure.
Ridley is dude. Dude. Okay,
All right. Well,
Ridley's in
let
this
me
game.
preface the. Let me preface this.
100%.
Because I agree actually, and I tweeted this out a little while ago. But like, I I think that I've heard a lot of people say that there's going to be like quote unquote Ridley in this game. It's not going to be Ridley as we know, but it'll be like a Ridley robot or like an E.M.M.I Ridley.
Yeah.
I'm totally on board with that. I could totally buy that. I think that makes a lot of sense. It's a good way to bring Ridley back. That's not cheap because like I feel like that would be a little bit cheap if he came back. Like he's died and come back to life so many times that it's kind of like a running joke. But I think that the finality of Super Metroid was really nice, and then you kind of brought him back in a clever way in Metroid Fusion. And then, I just feel like it'd be kind of, I don't know, it'd be kind of lame if they were just like, oh, Ridley actually survived and like he's here. Like even in Samus Returns, I mostly just thought that Ridley showing up was like more of an Easter egg than like actually related to
It was
the
like
plot,
fan
which is
service.
why I was which is
Yeah.
why I was just like, yeah, this is cool. But like if he was essential to the plot, it'd be like, but
Yeah, I agree.
I think that an E.M.M.I Ridley is like totally, totally possible, and I'm betting that that's what we get.
Well, look, you know me, like I'm a huge Ridley fan, so like as a huge Ridley fan, I agree. I like the fact that he had the like a permadeath in Super, like he's dead. Like that's fine. And yes, I agree like when they brought him back in Fusion, I thought that was cool. I think if they were the only way for them to bring back quote unquote Ridley again like organically, I think would be as if they had a clone of the Fusion clone that was like even more like how like the Fusion clone is like it's kind of like really exaggerated. It's like a caricature of Ridley, like the wings are really small, but it's like a big head and big, like it doesn't really, it looks like Ridley.
Big jaw, he looks like a
Exactly.
dinosaur.
It looks like all
Yeah.
deformed and stuff. I think it'd be cool if there was like a further clone that was even more deformed. It was like falling apart. Like there'd be no way to get even another clone out of it. Like once you'd kill it that time, it'd be done. But like, I don't think they need to do that. I doing another like a Ridley robot totally works. Like an E.M.M.I Ridley like totally works. I think like bringing the likeness of Ridley back is good enough. Like I think it's a cool concept that they can creatively do that in different ways. And the Ridley robot idea, to be honest, like in Zero Mission really wasn't like fleshed out like a ton, right? Like they could totally have done a lot more. So I'm totally cool with the Ridley robot too. And that's what I think they're doing. Like I tweeted about it and like showed those screenshots at one point. Like they're building a Ridley robot or something that looks like a huge Ridley in the background in one of those E.M.M.I rooms, like, or one of those rooms in there. Like you can not only see like his torso, he has an arm cannon, which is kind of like reminiscent of like the Metroid Prime 2, like Echo's like concept art for the Ridley that could have been in that game. And you can even see like the base of his wings at the top. So like it looks, I mean, if it's not Ridley, it's going to be like a huge Chozo mecha or whatever, or maybe even a huge Samus or something, another giant Samus. But I really think that's going to be like, it's going to be like a giant Ridley robot that Samus is going to have to fight. And I'm totally down with that. They give this huge Ridley robot, like a huge, massive boss with like an arm cannon that's firing back, plus like all the Ridley elements, I think would be awesome. And I think that's definitely what they're going to do. You can even look at like the Ridley, like, or even like the E.M.M.I bodies, and it looks like you could easily put a Ridley head on it. So I think Ridley coming back in some way through being a huge robot or an E.M.M.I form or something like that is very likely, and I think that's what we're going to see.
I kind of like the idea of Metroid like going forward using Ridley's likeness, even if Ridley himself is dead, because like that there's such like this personal animosity between Samus and Ridley, and if there's anything we know that Samus is like afraid of, I guess, or like is a sore spot for Samus. It's Ridley, so I like the idea that they use that going forward, where maybe Ridley's dead, but his legacy isn't. So we're gonna continue to use him in
Yes.
different ways.
Yeah,
So yeah,
definitely.
I think Emmy Ridley is like I'm on board with that theory. I think it's gonna be really cool. I was gonna talk about my boy Kraid, but I have to be honest. I don't really see him showing up in in Metroid Dread. I can't see an Emmy Ridley and an Emmy Kraid. Let's just put it that way.
I think Kraid is going to be a Metroid Prime 4 thing. I really honestly think they're going to do Meta Kraid. I think that's like something that they're going to bring back and be like, you know what? We almost did it. Like people know about it. Like it's a thing that people remember and like talk about. And I honestly think that they could do like Kraid would be really cool in a Metroid Prime 4. He'd be really cool in this kind of game too, but I think he'll be saved for Metroid Prime 4. Like Mercury Steam has like they've already brought Ridley back in a kind of way, and I think like bringing Ridley back they're probably more in tune for.
Mm.
And whereas like Retro tried to make Kraid happen at least once in Metroid Prime, I wonder if they go back, they might be like, hey, let's give it another go. So I agree with you there. I don't think we'll see both Ridley and Kraid, but I wouldn't be against it either. I think seeing Kraid in Metroid Dread would be really cool. It would be another really awesome like huge room, multi-story boss to fight. So I would be down for it. But yeah, I don't know if we'll see him this time.
I think to your point also, like that'd probably be a better 3D fight than a 2D
Yeah.
fight at this point, because like let's say that they kept it kind of the same in terms of like he shoots out the platforms and stuff or whatever. Just having like 360 platforms that you would need to navigate on, and like if there's lava on the ground or something, that sounds a little bit more fun to me than like just slaughtering Kraid again, because like he's awesome to look at, but like you can just like just mow the lawn over him in Zero Mission and Super and all that. So yeah, I think that would be a cool 3D fight.
Mm-hmm.
But let's talk about Mother Brain, and I guess the rest of the Space Pirates as well, because like we haven't really heard anything
Yeah.
about the Space Pirates. I guess really like we didn't even see them in Fusion. We saw X parasites that mimic Space Pirates, but like as far as we know, the Space Pirates are in shambles. So we haven't seen any indication that they are showing up in this game. But of course, we have that very Mother Brain looking esque. I forget what it was, but it looks like an Aurora
Central
unit.
units.
Yeah, yeah, and that's where you get your Omega Cannon from. So obviously there's like some kind of Mother Brain esque mechanism going on here. So I don't know. I feel like again, just like with Ridley, I don't think Mother Brain itself is going to show up, but like maybe the legacy of it will. In that, and I know that you didn't like the AI business from Other M, but I actually don't mind that idea necessarily. I always kind of like to prefer like I always prefer to think of Mother Brain as like an AI program, anyways. So I think that maybe they could do that if they wanted, but yeah, I don't know. I think that obviously there's references to Mother Brain so far, but I would be interested to see in what way they can use like the space pirates in this game.
So yeah, I was thinking about this too because I'm not necessarily against like Mother Brain coming back or anything. What I think is likely is I feel like the space pirates, because I don't think like Ridley himself's gonna come back, but the space pirates are resilient in a way. Like they always kind of they also come back and bounce back and somehow figure it out. And you're right, by Metroid Fusion, they're also like really kind of gone. We don't even see real ones in that game. But I think by Metroid Dread, maybe they've rebuilt enough where they're scavenging for stuff, right? And they're still rebuilding like their army and they're rebuilding their fleet and all their resources, right? So maybe in Dread, maybe they also stumble upon ZDR and maybe they send like, I don't know, teams to the planet to try to get like take those central units because they kind of have that like Mother Brain element to them. Maybe they could use those to rebuild Mother Brain. And then they also find out, oh, there's also other stuff in here like the Omega Cannon and blah, 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 whatever, other stuff Samus can get off of those. I'm sure they would use that stuff somehow. So maybe like throughout the game, you could have like the space pirates like landing on the planet on like a drop ship in groups, and you got to take them out really quickly, or maybe stop them from stealing a central unit before you get to it, or something like that. Or maybe they do steal one, you got to steal it back from them, or they've taken like whatever the upgrade is, and you got to fight them as they use it against you. I don't know how likely that is, but I think that'd be a cool way to incorporate them into the game. You know, like they're rebuilding a little bit, and they're, well, what do the space pirates do best? Rebuilding what they know they've built before. So maybe they even see that Ridley robot. They're like, "Oh, that's a good idea," and maybe they try
we
to.
had one of those.
Yeah, like hey, like we did that, and maybe they try to take control of that. You know, maybe the facility is somehow already related to them. So I would like to see the space pirates kind of like, I liked in Fusion how it was kind of like, okay, they're X parasites are not really there, so like they're just enemies. Really, it was kind of cool. But they weren't really like a major part of the game at all, and they were just, you know, another enemy type essentially. I would like for them in this game to have like bounced back a little bit. They're trying to rebuild. They're trying to scavenge for resources and take what they can get, and maybe they end up on ZDR and try to start taking what they can get from there as like a side thing for Samus to deal with while she's fighting the E.M.M.Is and dealing with the Chozo and Metroids and X and all that. Because I would like for them to come back. I like the space pirates. I think they're a cool bunch of enemies. There's all these different enemy types, and certainly I think we'll see them in Metroid Prime 4. So even though that's earlier in the games, just, you know, release wise, I think they want to, you know, bring back a lot of those like classic elements of Metroid 2 while also introducing new stuff. And I think seeing the space pirates come back would be a cool way to, you know, join alongside the new, you know, E.M.M.Is and whatnot. So yeah, that's how I would like to see them implemented. I think that'd be a cool way to bring them in. You fight off groups every once in a while. They like crash land on the planet maybe, and they make their way down. Maybe you run into them fighting E.M.M.Is themselves, and you get into a big fight. I don't know. It could be cool.
I had like a scenario that I thought would be kind of cool for space pirates, and it's like full on fan fiction, like full on fan fiction. Like this is like Avengers Endgame stuff, but like, so I was thinking like, man, it would be like really cool and somewhat satisfying if like, let's just say that the space pirates had like an AI mother brain or something that was back leading them or whatever. But I was like, man, if the Dark Chozo amassed so much power and he's got like this army of like evil Metroids that he's controlling, and maybe he's got the E.M.M.Is on his side, wouldn't that be cool if like just temporarily Samus and space pirates were like, we have to work together to like take these guys down.
I knew you were gonna say that.
I think that would be actually kind of cool, like having this like uneasy alliance that like, you know, the space pirates are gonna try and get you as soon as they can, but like you kind of have to work together for a little bit. You could maybe introduce a new character or a new leader of the space pirates as well. You have that opportunity if you do this. I thought that'd be kind of cool, like build up some tension in the game and like see like, you know, is this guy trying to screw me, or like, are we actually going to do what we agreed to and take out this, I don't know, whatever thing that the Dark Chozo has. I realize everybody, I'm sure listening to this, hates that, but I thought that would be kind of neat, actually.
You know, I honestly don't hate it. I wouldn't be against it entirely. I think something like Samus and Ridley teaming up would never happen. But
no, it couldn't be Ridley.
But
it probably couldn't be Mother Brain either. Now that I said that,
no, I don't think it could. But I could see individual space pirates teaming up with Samus. I mean, very unlikely, and I feel like Samus would just like just destroy them before there's even a conversation. But maybe not. Maybe you know, they'd be able to be like somehow, you know, negotiate something, and yeah, like the tension of like, okay, you know, they're gonna turn on me. It's not a matter of if, it's when. Gotta always, you know, keep my head on a swivel. I'm not against that. I do think that concept would work better in Metroid Prime 4. I'm not gonna lie, but I could see that also working in this game. I honestly don't hate it. I was expecting a little. I mean, I was kind of expecting just that. It was very fan fictiony, but you know what? If there was
I told you.
if there was a good reason for like a couple or maybe one space pirate to team up with you, a really good reason, like Samus really had no choice, and they kind of wrote it that like well that way, I think, you know, I wouldn't be against it. No, but you know, I don't want Samus kind of like getting a space pirate sidekick that she's like friends with or anything. But then again, you know what? If the character's really cool, maybe I could change my mind on that too. As long as it's written well and it makes sense, and it's like like they really make it necessary, like they got to put it aside, otherwise they're both gonna die.
Yeah, of course.
And like they really like, you know, like I don't know, like get as much drama and like tension as they can out of it, yeah, I'm down for that.
I feel like you'd have to make it like absolutely necessary, and maybe into even further along why the space pirates would even do this is like the Dark Chozo used the space pirates somehow and then just I don't know betrayed him or something like that. And I can't think of a scenario of why that would happen, but let's just say that did. This would be I think a new like a new character moment or an opportunity to build up a new character.
Maybe
like
it's
let's
Weevil.
just say sure, let's say it's Weevil. Let's say
I'd be
Weevil
down.
is the new leader of the space pirates, and like you can actually flesh this guy out, and like he's just like, all right, I hate you, Samus, but we have a common enemy, and like we have to put our differences aside. Let's kill him, and then let's kill each other. But let's kill him first. I think that could be cool.
See, the thing is, the one thing I do think, and I've thought this for a while, is I don't think Weevil hates Samus, so maybe it would be better if it was just another space pirate, which I'd also be okay with, but I'm also always down to bring back the hunters, so. But yeah, I could definitely see that happening. Samus teaming up with anybody as long as she, like, knows it's necessary. I don't think she's someone that would, like, her ego or anything like that would kind of get in the way, right? Like, she knows like, okay, if I gotta live, and the only way to do it is if I team up with this dude, this space pirate guy, then I'm gonna do it. Like I think I don't,
Right.
I think that's the kind of person she would be. So I'm definitely down for that.
And we've even seen that. Like she compromised to get on the BSL and Fusion. She didn't want to have Adam overlooking her, but that was the only way to get there, so she did. So and she obviously worked with the team and in other M. So I mean, we have seen her kind of make some concessions in the past. So I realized that was kind of fanfiction-y, but I thought that might be cool.
I could
and
also
a good way
see
to build
them.
up a new character.
Maybe she's like forced to work with a space pirate, like by the Dark Chozo or something like that. Maybe she has no choice, right? Like could be like
Yeah.
a Master Chief Arbiter thing, right? Gravemind kind of forces both of them to work together. Otherwise, everyone's screwed, and then they end up being homies. So who knows? Could work out.
I think that it's important that like Metroid Dread introduces like a new character. It feels like forever since we've had a new like
A new good
character. Yeah, like the last one really was like God. The last one was probably like Dark Samus or maybe Silex.
Anthony.
If you want to go hunters.
I think Anthony was fine.
I think Anthony was good actually, but I'm talking like a character that like in the next Super Smash Bros. You could see them like getting into the roster. You know what I mean? Like if the villain of Dread is like the Dark Chozo, and let's just call him Dark Chozo, like he's a big threat, like he could get into Smash.
See, I
like,
think it could be
maybe
Silex.
there's like an E.M.M.I that can get into Smash or something, or maybe it will be Silex
Yeah.
after Metroid Prime 4. But I just want like a new good character for the series, but like a prominent character, and I think the series, I mean, I think it needs it. It's been riding Ridley and Samus for so long that like
Yeah.
we need someone new.
I agree. I would love to see a new main character that not only shows up in Dread, but shows up in the next games that come up afterward. And honestly, I think that's very likely that we'll see that because, they stress time and time again that like this is the end of the current arc, like the current arc between Samus and the Metroids. So we know that there are going to be like very likely that there are going to be characters that we aren't going to see again after Dread. So they need to create new stars, they gotta create the new generation.
Push the new guys.
They gotta push the new guys. You can't keep putting over these part-timers, these old guys. And
Ridley comes back for the big payoff once a year.
as I say that, they brought back John Cena and Oldberg last night, so
Seeing John Cena was actually kind of cool, but Goldberg is just like, ugh.
Yeah, John Cena I don't mind seeing now. And it's funny because he looks so old. He looks like a dad. And it's like he has like his hair slicked back.
Yeah.
It looks great. And then I used to be, I'm a WCW guy growing up when I was really young. And so I actually used to like Goldberg, like he was awesome in WCW back in the day. But Oldberg, man, like
I loved Goldberg, and
not a huge fan
I
of
loved
Oldberg.
Goldberg when he came back the first time. And
Yeah,
had
the
that
first
thing
time,
with Brock
yeah.
Lesnar. But then it was like he's back again and again and again. Anyways, we should save this for our buddy Russ's new wrestling podcast someday. He wants us on the show.
Yeah, man, I'm
But
waiting.
yeah, let's all right. Let's actually we have some follow up from last week. We were talking about Yoshio Sakamoto and some of the comments that he made in the development history of Metroid Dread. So we actually have an interview that he conducted with Famitsu, and I'm gonna try and see if I can give credit to the guy who translated it. Give me one sec here while I look. But there's tons and tons and tons of interesting topics that he talks about in this interview. So here we go. Translation provided by Centurion Nugget and Jerop on behalf of Nintendo Everything. So thank you, Nintendo Everything, for the great translation. Tons of like super interesting stuff in here, and I thought we would just kind of take a bullet point approach and jump around here and maybe just discuss what he said if there is anything that we want to add, or if we just kind of want to move on. But let's start off with something that I think that everybody is still a little bit sensitive about, and that is the characterization of Samus. And Famitsu asked him point blank, like, what kind of character is Samus in Metroid Dread? And Sakamoto said, quote, "She's the same Samus everyone knows. You can't go wrong with the stoic pro bounty hunter."
Pro gamer.
So
She's a pro gamer.
Seems like they took some of the feedback of other M to heart. Seems like they know exactly what the fans are looking for from their Samus.
Yeah, I mean, duh. I don't know why they needed no one liked how they characterized Samus and other M, and obviously you can go on and on about that, but the question is already answered by like the footage we've seen. We've seen the cutscenes where like Samus is no nonsense and she's doing it with a little bit of flair, but like she's crushing enemies, right? And like that is the Samus that we know and love. She is the best at what she does, and you can easily see that like they're emphasizing that in this game, that like she's not like afraid to go into any room. She's got her hand on her arm cannon ready to go, not pointed up in the air or on the ground, but in front of her where she could shoot something. She's doing like melee attacks. Like she looks like a fun character to not only play as, but to get invested in as, the player of the game, which I think goes a super long way. When you have not just like when the gameplay feels good, that's great. But when you have a character you care about, it makes everything have more meaning. And it's great to have a Samus that looks awesome, looks badass, and has fun to play as and fun to, kind of be and immerse yourself in the world of Metroid Dread. So I love to see this.
Yeah, and I actually think that like if you have a great story and great characters, that can like totally override subpar gameplay, at least for me, in a lot of instances.
To a degree, yeah, I agree. Maybe not overall, like maybe not to the fullest extent. Sometimes the gameplay is not there.
You maybe wouldn't call it the greatest game ever, but like if I'm playing a game that I feel is like average, but it has a really good story, I'm just like, all right, well, I'm going to keep playing. Whereas otherwise, I might have just shut it off. So I love the line. This kind of tickled me, just the way he said it. Like, you can't go wrong with a stoic bounty hunter. And in kind of implying like, well, we tried to, we did go wrong with the emotional bounty hunter, and look where that got us. So I thought that was just kind of a fun line. Stoic, though, is a key word that implies that Samus won't be doing much talking here, which is kind of funny because Samus did a fair amount of talking in Metroid Fusion. So it's not like it's like unprecedented for Samus to, show emotion and talk or whatever, but it seems like maybe we won't get exactly that in Metroid Dread, which is fine.
I don't know. I mean,
that word stuck out to me.
I feel like stoic is just like in terms of her like disposition, right? She's going to be more reserved. So I can still see her talking. She's probably going to talk in a different way. And also remember, a lot of the talking she does in Metroid Fusion is to herself, So it's like if you look at like all the talking she does with other people, it's not a lot. I would say actually a majority of the talking in the game for her is like to herself. Like a lot of the time Adam's talking at her, like she's not really responding. He's just talking and you're like, okay. And then you dip. Like there's only a couple times where she really like kind of goes back and forth with someone. Otherwise she's talking to herself. So I could see that being the case where she talks to herself maybe, and then she has some conversations here and there with other characters, but otherwise she's, keeps it light, keeps it low key, keeps it more reserved. You can still be emotional, but you might see it more through her actions and not necessarily her saying, "I'm sad" or whatever, which is more closer to other M, I guess.
I actually love this. The interviewer, whoever interviewed Sakamoto, did like a really awesome job of just dancing around the questions of like. So their follow-up question is, some games in the Metroid series have a lot of cutscenes and others don't. What he's asking is like, Other M had a ton of cutscenes and like most other games don't. What's going on with this game? And Sakamoto basically answers like that the storyline is so important to Metroid Dread, so there are going to be cutscenes, but he kind of hints that they're going to be more along the lines of like the Samus Returns cutscenes, which I actually think is a good way to go with like, using the in-game engine, so it's not like Metroid Other M. I think that the cutscenes themselves were nice. The content wasn't great, but there was kind of like a I don't even the word I'm looking for, but it was like almost like, okay, it's time for a cutscene, play the film, and like instead of like one seamless integrated cutscene that started and from the gameplay and then went into the cutscene. Do you know what I'm trying to say? And
Yeah.
Samus Returns, I think, did a good job with doing that, and like it was one kind of seamless flow of motion.
Right, yeah. I mean, Samus Returns did in-game, like, in-engine cutscenes, and then you have Other M, which has, a mixture of in-engine cutscenes and pre-rendered cutscenes that are just entirely pre-rendered CGI.
Yeah, yeah, that's the word. Yeah, that's what I'm looking for.
So, yeah. I mean, for a game like Metroid Dread, on a smaller scale, I think just doing it entirely in-game and like the in-engine is fine. Personally, I have no problem with a pre-rendered, like all CG, like pre-rendered cutscene that is not in engine if it's done really well. And usually that's for like a larger scale game. So I'm anticipating that kind of stuff for like Metroid Prime 4, or maybe not. They could also do it in engine. Like Halo Infinite's doing it all in engine and isn't doing like the blur cinematics. But like I love those cutscenes. If those cutscenes are done really well, I have no problem with it taking control away from me and then like taking me out of like the game essentially and showing me a movie. If the movie's good, I'm down for it either way. So
yeah,
I don't mind in that, but I think for a game like Dread, because you not only have like those cutscenes, but you also have the melee cinematics and all of that, and like the boss cinematics, where you do have, like you said, that seamless kind of flow. I think just to keep it consistent, it's nice to have that, but also it's a smaller scale game, so I anticipate them going the more entirely in-engine route. I'm not entirely sure what they'll do with Prime 4. It might be a mix, might be just be one or the other. But for Dread, I think it's better to have that seamless in-engine kind of look. And honestly, the game looks great in motion and like when you kind of do the different angles and whatnot. So why not do it in engine? There's no need to kind of.
I was gonna say like the games are mostly at the point where like in engine looks so good anyways that like you don't need to do.
Yeah, I agree.
The CG cutscenes.
Yeah,
So,
if it looks good enough in engine, then yeah, like there are some exceptions. Again, like if it's Blur Studios or something, that's like Hollywood movie quality. If you can pull that off for a Metroid game, by all means do it. But I don't think that's going to happen for Dread or any Metroid game. But if it did, I would lose my mind. But yeah, like I agree. Like games are getting to the point where you can do it all in engine. It still looks really good. And so if they can do that, I'm totally okay with that.
this stuck out to me as well. The interviewer asks, in Metroid Dread, is there anything in the game tailored to speedrunning like in previous games? And Sakamoto says, it's safe to say that those elements remain basically as they were in previous Metroid games. I don't think I've actually ever heard Sakamoto answer a question about speedrunning. I've heard him talk about like players can choose different ways to play the game and whatnot, and that's kind of like them talking about speedrunning, I think. But first time I think I've seen him point blank address speedrunning, and maybe this is a double-edged sword because obviously he says that those elements are going to remain in place, but I know that some people would have liked to maybe see a little bit more emphasis on speed running. So
yeah,
I mean, he didn't say that there isn't going to be any of that, but reading that comment, it seems like, to me at least, he's saying like that's something that's available in the game if you want to do it, but it's not like we're going to spotlight it if you don't. Maybe I'm wrong.
I mean, it's a non-answer. I don't think they're emphasizing or even considering speedrunning really at all. Like maybe I'm sure it's like thought of somewhere, but like I think the main tell here is that he's saying the elements remain basically as they were in previous Metroid games. But if you've tried to speedrun all the different 2D Metroids, you would know that the sequence breaking in all the different 2D Metroids is different. Some, you could sequence break some more than others, right? Like, so to say that the elements remain the same as they were in previous Metroids, well, that would imply that he thinks, that it's the same across all the Metroid games, and that's not true. So, or he's not thinking about it at all and just giving this answer, which is what I'm kind of getting at, is that I don't think they're really thinking about that at all. Like, not even like in the way of, yeah, if they want to speed run it or not, like that's not just, they're just looking to make this game. And I'm sure if people will speed run it. They probably maybe thought about that once and like, yeah, they're going to speed run it, but I don't think they're doing anything to like tailor the game to speed running, or they're really keeping that in mind in terms of the actual development. And I can definitely confirm that, at least as far as I'm concerned, based on this answer, because it's essentially a non-answer. Like, he's not showing any kind of awareness of how it works in the previous games, so that tells me he's not thinking about it.
Which is kind of funny because, like, obviously he was in tune enough to, see what people were saying about Other M and the criticisms there. So, like, I feel like if you're in tune enough with that, like, you have to be in tune enough to know that, like, speedrunning is such a big part of, like, why Metroid has, been so everlasting and so popular. So it is always, like, I don't know. I've always wondered why they didn't lean into that a little bit more, like, particularly with the 2D games, since that's, I mean, like, Super Metroid for so many years, and maybe it still is, but that was, like, the game for speedrunning.
I mean, I know Nintendo, if they can avoid like emphasizing stuff that like focuses more on playing the game in like a more hardcore dedicated way, they'll do it, unless the game is entirely built for that purpose. So like, you have like Smash, for example, which like they don't consider to be a competitive game even though it's played competitively, whereas like Splatoon was made with competitive play in mind, so they don't mind emphasizing it that way, or Pokemon or whatever, right? So even though you're right, like the speedrunning parts of the community have, certainly kept Metroid going in terms of like its popularity in some ways, but at the same time, it also is stuck around because people in general just still like to play Metroid. It might not be involved in speedrunning at all. I mean, you yourself you're not involved in speedrunning at all, and you just continue to like Metroid. So like there are tons of people that are just like that have no knowledge of speedrunning or don't care about it, but still like Metroid. And I think for them, they don't want to emphasize something about the game that might, I guess, zone people out, or not ostracize, but like they're trying to get new and old people into the games. And if they like emphasize, oh, game is going to be tailored for people who want to play it hardcore and speedrunning, in their minds, they might think that might turn off some more casual players, which they don't want to do because they're trying to bring in new, players into the fold. So that's generally how they usually do it with these games, unless the whole game is developed with competitive or more hardcore dedicated kind of gaming in mind. They tend to not emphasize that at all, even if those elements are clearly part of the game package. So that's why I'm not surprised they're not really going for it.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. All right, well, let's keep going here with the interview. I had it pulled up, and of course I just lost it as we get here. But I did want to talk about. So I think it was even last week you and I were saying like, what concept took so long to kind of flesh out, and Sakamoto answers that question actually directly before he answers the speedrunning question.
I mean, and he answers it, but I don't know if he really answers it.
kind of, sort of.
He gives an answer for sure.
He gives an answer.
I don't know. Say if it answers the question, but yeah, go on.
But I mean, the question that they ask is like, was there anything left over from the original project 15 years ago that made it into Metroid Dread? And Sakamoto says like the concept itself has never changed. The idea was always to have these E.M.M.Is, or a fearsome enemy, as he says, hunting down Samus, which never changed. So maybe, and we were kind of speculating, like, it feels like you could have done that, and like I wonder what the technology was that wasn't there, because he says many times in this interview how like big of an influence the SAX was on developing Metroid Dread and the concept of that. So he actually says at one point too, they're just asking him about the rumors about Metroid Dread and how long it's been in development and stuff like that, and Sakamoto says, quote, "We tried at one point, but it got canceled halfway through. When we gave it another shot further down the line, the game ended up completely different." So basically he says that resources killed the project the second time, but the technology wasn't there the first time. So I guess that's kind of confirmation of like, it was the E.M.M.I concept that was what was holding Dread back. And so I feel like there's got to be like a big expansion to that concept coming in, because like I know the E.M.M.Is move really fluidly and like really well, but I don't know. I'm not sure that you couldn't have done that on the Nintendo DS. I say that knowing nothing about video game development, but I don't know. To me, it just seems like maybe it could have been done.
Yeah, you know, I don't know anything about game development, and obviously I'm gonna take the guy's word for it. But you know, game developers lie all the time about the actual development of games, and to be honest, like I can't wrap my head around like, okay, maybe they couldn't have done this on the Game Boy Advance, and I'll even give them the benefit of the doubt. Like, okay, they couldn't do it on the DS, even though I feel like the DS would be perfect for this because you have the two screens you can go between to get away from the E.M.M.I. So like, I feel like that would have been perfect on the DS. It would have made so much sense. So like, I don't understand why it couldn't have been that. But what I really don't understand is why they couldn't have made it on the Wii U. They were able to make Other M. I don't understand, like, the technology was there to make that game. Why was the technology not there to make Emmys on the Wii U? Like, I don't... The Switch is, you know, a better system, but it's not that much stronger than a Wii U. And it's not conceptually that much different either if you look at the gamepad from the Wii U and the Switch. So, like, I don't really understand, like, technologically what those... Like, he keeps saying there were technological hurdles, but, like, what were they? Like... Was the system not strong enough? And then I'm like, okay, but like, you're essentially just, you know, you have an AI that chases you. It's not that difficult. Like, and Mercury Steam, I can't imagine that they're the only game studio in the world that could make this work. Like, you know, like, so I just don't understand, like, why wasn't Other M Metroid Dread? Why did they not just make it then? Why didn't it work on the DS? Like, I don't buy, again, I'll take the guy's word for it. I'm not going to die on this hill, but I personally, it's hard to believe that it wasn't possible. And that said, we know that Metroid's a franchise where, like, if someone's not beating the drum, the game's not going to get made, you know? Like, they need someone internally that's really kind of, you know, like, championing Metroid and really trying to get a game made. And that's why we didn't see, like, a Metroid game made for the N64, because there was no one really trying to make one. And thankfully that, you know, that changed in the 2000s, but maybe it was the case of, you know, they couldn't get it going, and maybe they were close enough to make it working, but no one really doing anything. You know, no one was really there to kind of really push it. And maybe Sakamoto didn't push hard enough, or maybe he got this other idea for other... You know, I just don't understand how Other M got made, but this game didn't way back when. Like, what the difference was, why they couldn't make it work then, you know? So it's hard to believe that this was so impossible, that this was so hard to do for multiple console generations and multiple platforms for different decades over so many years that, like, nobody could do it. They couldn't figure it out. Very hard to believe, but I mean, that's what the guy's saying. So I guess we kind of have to take it at face value. I'd really like to know, though, what that prototype was, what that second step was. Because again, he mentions how, you know, they gave it another shot further down the line. I really want to know what that, like, that middle ground was, and even what the earlier, you know, design, what, you know, was, because clearly we now know, like, this game really was attempted multiple times. I would love to see, like, what those iterations were, and maybe that might give us some more insight into why it didn't work back then.
Unless I just keep coming back to, like, because I agree with everything you just said, like, 100%, but I keep coming back to, like, there's got to be something else to these Emmys that makes it more than we've seen, that, like, they're really, like, turns up the heat to make this concept, like, really hard to pull off. I don't know. It seems weird to me. Sakamoto puts over Mercury Steam, like, all, like, everywhere in this interview. He's saying, like, what a great development studio they are, and you know, who can argue with that? Samus Returns, I think, is one of the best Metroid games. So it probably certainly helped having a team the caliber of Mercury Steam, and a team who's obviously passionate about Metroid. You know, they pitched a Metroid Fusion remake originally, so obviously they kind of understood the idea of, like, this threat that's hunting you, because that's basically what Fusion is built around. And like I said, Sakamoto continuously references the SAX as, like, a big inspiration for, you know, for this game, and kind of the vibe that they were going for. Although he was very quick to call it, or not to call it, a horror game, because they asked him about that. Yeah, and he's like, no, this is not a horror game.
Yeah, you know, I think that's fine too, because it isn't. You know, horror games are really about, like, you have barely any options. You gotta run away, and even though Samus does run away here, like, she's doing it kind of strategically, you know, in a lot of ways. She can
and in a specific zone. At least for what we've seen, yeah.
And yeah, she can respond in some ways, and then exactly, outside that zone, she's the E.M.M.I essentially, right? Like, she's the dominant force out everywhere else. Whereas, you know, in a horror game, you really don't have any kind of refuge ever. And horror games tend to be slower too, right? Like this game looks like you're going to be able to be on the move, sliding, quickly moving about, wall jumping, and you don't have to take the game slowly if you don't want to. So I think there's also that difference there, and I like that he made it, even though it will have a horror elements for sure, just by the nature of like the tension of getting chased. But it's certainly not like the main focus, like, and even aesthetically either. So yeah.
Well, let's end on one last thing that he said here. We all knew this, but Sakamoto really just hammered it home. Famitsu asked, "You mentioned that Metroid Dread will round off the series' story. Does this make it the final chapter in the 5-part saga?" And Sakamoto says, quote, "This is the last chapter in the series so far, the final chapter about the shared fate and adversarial relationship Samus shares with the Metroids. This isn't the end of the Metroid series. We don't want that. I'm sure fans don't want that. And we hope you'll look forward to what's coming in future episodes." So, I mean, when I think that quote probably got taken, not out of context necessarily, but some people definitely overreacted to that and were like, "Oh my god, this is the last Metroid game."
What?
I really think that this is going to set up whatever is next. I think that it's going to, like we were talking about, I think it has to build up new characters, new enemies. It can conclude one story while being a jumping off point for the next story. I'm really hoping that is what Dread is going to be, and like lay the seeds for what is coming next.
I mean, that's definitely. I mean, did people really freak out about that? Because I mean, he literally says this isn't the end of the Metroid series. Like, he literally says it right there. So I mean, yeah. I mean, this isn't even the only interview he's even said that. He said that. I think this was even said at E3, where they said this is not the last Metroid 2D Metroid. They're making more 2D Metroids. Like, we are confirmed making more Metroids after this. So I'm surprised to hear that people were up in arms about this. He even says in the quote, "This isn't the end of the Metroid series." I don't know how more plainly you can put it. You know, he's literally saying, no, it's not the end. So we don't want that. I'm sure the fans don't want that. And we hope you'll look forward to what's coming in future episodes. He literally says there's more coming. So I don't know what the issue is. We know Metroid Prime 4 is coming, and we know multiple times, not even in other sources, in this one source, he says multiple times that there is more Metroid beyond Metroid Dread coming. And also, like, they've stressed the timeline. Like, when they say there's more Metroid coming after Metroid Dread, they don't just mean Metroid Prime 4. Like, they mean story-wise, there's more coming after Dread in the story. So there's no need to be worried. I mean, they're making 2 big Metroid games right now. They're planning more for sure. I mean, most developers start thinking about the next game like when that game is being started.
As soon as that game is shipped,
yeah. And I'm sure when they started this, they were thinking 2, maybe even 3 games down the line, because they're thinking story-wise what the implications are and how they can build on it, right? If they're writing it correctly, they'd be outlining Metroid Dread, after Metroid Dread, and the game after that, right? Because they're likely planning a whole arc. Same thing with Metroid Prime 4. They're probably thinking about not just 4, they're thinking about 5, they're thinking about 6, they're thinking about whatever, ODST version, like they're thinking about all those different games. They're not just thinking about the one. So, yeah, I mean, he's saying it very plainly right here. We're getting more Metroid, and who doesn't want that?
I was about to make a Kingdom Hearts joke about like the ridiculous subtitles, but I can't even think of what they are. It's like 352.8 or something like that.
A half days.
They're making Metroid 352.
Yeah, I mean, I'm down for that. I've always been waiting for Donkey Kong 128 or Super Mario 128. I wish they would do that, and they never did.
Real talk, I'm sure they're working on Metroid 6. I'm sure that we're going to get a remake of Fusion at some point, and I'm sure that trilogy is coming out. So yeah, lots of Metroid. Can't wait. As always, we say this every week, but damn it bears repeating. I can't wait for Metroid Dread to come out. But next week we are jumping off of the Metroid Dread train, and we're going to return to definitively rank a Metroid game. Should we say which one it is, or should we play that close to the chest? What do you think?
Hey man, you're the only one who's played it out of the 2 of us, so I think you have the right to make that call.
Let's keep it a secret. Let's surprise everybody next week with our definitive ranking. I would say I got like an hour left in this game, and I'm pretty impressed with it so far. So I'm looking forward to that. It feels like it's been a while since we did a definitive ranking. The last one was Metroid Fusion.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I'm looking forward to this. Of course, love talking about Metroid Dread, but I think that this is like 8 shows in a row or something. So it will be nice to talk about something else because, you know, all we can say at this point is like we have to wait and see until October, which, my God, isn't even that far away. But yeah, I'm looking forward to doing the next Metroid definitive ranking. And I had not played this Metroid game in years before playing it, so lots of fun.
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely going to do some more Metroid Dread down the line, like, and
Of
we're going to
course,
be
yeah.
also. I'm looking forward. All right. So I'm going to spoil one episode, but I'm very much looking forward to when we do the covering the whole 2D Metroid history. I
Yeah.
think that's going to be really cool. So I'm very much looking forward to that. I think that'll be a really cool lead into Dread. Yeah, I've never played the game that we're going to cover. It's the only Metroid game I've never played. So.
Okay.
Which might spoil it, I guess, if people know all the games I've played before, because I think I might have said this, but yeah, and you're gonna have to tear me away from Destiny 2, man. You know, I don't know what else you're playing lately other than this game, but I got really
Skyward Sword HD, baby.
I hope you're enjoying that, man. I heard that it came out.
I'm loving it.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I'm loving it.
I just got into Destiny 2 last Tuesday, and I've put in 65 hours since last Tuesday.
Wow.
I am addicted. I love this game. I don't know why I didn't start playing it sooner. If anyone plays Destiny 2 out there, let me know. I'm playing a Titan. I just hit level 52 or something today. Almost like at 1300 gear level. But anyway, really loving this game. I mean, as an FPS, it's like a Halo MMORPG. Like I'm loving it. This game is so cool. It's so awesome. I think I played it for like 12, 13 hours each day over the weekend. I am crushing this game. Really loving it. So I'm gonna have to tear myself away to play this one for the next episode.
Well, don't worry. You'll only need to tear yourself away for like 4 or 5 hours. It's a short one, yeah. All right, we're gonna get out of here. Of course, we want you guys to check us out over on Twitter at Omega Metroid Pod, at Spiteri316, at DaxCity_, and make sure that you are telling that Metroid fan in your life where they can get their weekly Metroid fix. And of course, check us out over on Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, wherever you get your podcast. Like and subscribe. That is it, everybody. We will see you back here next week for some definitive ranking. Until then, take care.